For the next hour, they're going to be the views of Bob Chapman, of the International Forecaster. Bob, how are you today?
Well, I'm pretty good. Don't have a complaint in the world.
All right, fine. Well, you obviously then aren't invested in the stock market.
That's correct. I am not invested in the stock market.
All right. Are you still short on some of those financial?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. We got a long way to go on the downside, both in stocks collectively, and the leader to the downside will be the financials.
What about General Electric? Do you think that what's going to happen to them? Are they going to survive this?
Yeah, they'll survive. They're one of the top aluminum companies, so that they will find a way to spare them. And they've already received loans from the government. The government bought their commercial paper, and they complained they couldn't sell it in the market. They were probably offering as collateral some of this toxic junk, and that's why the market doesn't want to accept their paper. And so the stocks just come down from 35 to, I don't know what, 13.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll survive, but only because they're part of the aluminum structure.
And then I have that same impression about General Motors. Certainly they're opening up plants all throughout the rest of the world as they're shifting their manufacturing facilities away from America to China and Brazil and Mexico and certainly elsewhere. And so the average individual doesn't understand that there is an organized effort to move our industries offshore so they can impoverish the American people and create the same sort of chaos here that they're creating in Mexico today.
Well, that's true, and it's a simple way to stop that. All they have to do is legislate the imposition of tariffs on goods and services. And then all of those companies that moved offshore to use the slave labor that's available, there's going to be no further advantage to being there.
Well, of course, they don't
have. So they will come back.
Well, because they don't have to pay any taxes overseas. Maybe we ought to tax them if they're American corporations. But I don't think they're going to do that. Do you honestly believe they're going to put tariffs back on? I mean, as long as the people from the Trilateral Commission, dedicated globalists, control successive administrations, as they have with every administration, control the Federal Reserve, control the World Bank, and control the presidency, do you really think that we're going to do what's logical and right for America?
No, but they may get forced to do it because there are a number of nations, starting with China and Russia and Brazil and others, who are starting to put the tariffs on goods.
Because that's
one
thing.
I think it's going to spread because they're all trying to lower the value of their currency so that their goods will be competitive for other markets, particularly America and Europe. And, when you've got right now about 15% unemployment, and you will probably have over 30% within a year to 2 years, there's going to be a lot of people who are on the street saying, bring those jobs back, or we're going to do something about changing the government.
Hold that thought. We're going to be back in just a moment with Bob Chapman right here at the Radio Liberty Network. Well, this is Dr. Stan here at Radio Liberty, coming to you from the hills overlooking beautiful and picturesque Monterey Bay, and the sky's blue today, the air's crisp, it's beginning to warm up. It is a beautiful day to live here. Well, anyway, our guest is Bob Chapman, and we're talking about what's going on financially in the world. And certainly, every time you pick up a magazine or a newspaper, you find more companies are shutting down, and even Microsoft's beginning to lay off people. And certainly all of our major manufacturers are laying off, and so many of our small businesses are closing. Our stores are closing. Certainly commercial property, where, of course, in the malls are closing. Some of our big department stores are closing. Here in the Central Coast of California, why we've lost Mervyn's, we've lost Gottschalk's, and I'm sure you must be seeing the same thing happening all across America, aren't you, Bob?
Sure are. And it's starting to happen in Europe and Canada as well. And it'll spread throughout the world. And there's nothing to stop it. And these businesses of stimulus packages, and they're not going to work because they don't attack the real problem, and that is the importation of cheap goods and creating long-term employment for Americans. And, they have no plan for that. And so it's obvious that they don't want any long-term recovery. As we've discussed many times, they want a societal breakdown, and with that, the imposition of a world currency as well as world government.
And I think
that's what they're after.
I think it's so important people understand these things are not happening by accident; they're happening by intent. Henry Paulson had said publicly, and he'd written, the reason that we have this, this whole economic collapse is because of the collapse of the housing market. And what we need to do is buy up the mortgages, buy up these mortgage bonds, and we could stop the whole thing. And that's why they gave him the TARP funds, the $700 billion, and then he refused to spend it. In fact, he couldn't even, lend the money. He couldn't give all the money away, the $700 billion. He still had $350 billion right up till Obama was ready to go into the White House. But he still wouldn't do what was logical to try to stop the cascade of a collapse of the housing market. So it's obvious that they want this whole thing to go on, that they're not doing any of the logical things that could have been done early on. In fact, they've done everything illogical, cutting off small business loans, having the Fed pay interest so they could soak up so much of the loan material, so there was just the lending pool was just gone, and the Fed had it all. We'll be right back. Well, this is Dr. Stan. We were just talking about Chapman, about how they've engineered this whole thing, and until people understand that you have groups, I call them the Brotherhood of Darkness, Council on Foreign Relations, Bilderberger, Trilateral Commission, they all work together, and they're working as a whole to destroy the economy of our country, and that's why they've shipped our manufacturing overseas. That's why they precipitated this economic crisis. That's why people are losing their homes. And, of course, once you start this cascade of events, why there's just no way to stop it until it gets to the bottom. And even if they intervene now, in the markets, why they wouldn't stop it unless we would do what was logical, and that would be put on tariffs and force the industries back home. But they don't want to preserve America. Did you read that article I sent you, the link to Henry Kissinger's article, Bob?
Oh, I put it in the Sandy issue of the International Forecaster.
I know. As a matter of fact, I read it there, and I smiled that I was so glad to see you got that out, because that information is so vitally important. Henry Kissinger is telling them what it's all about. There's going to be chaos and fragmentation and the destruction of the whole economy of the whole world. And the solution...
Unless you do what we want you to do.
Unless you do what we want you to do, that's right. Everybody should...
And bring on the chaos.
And the fact he would talk about how nations are going to fragment, how there's going to be chaos, unless we do what the elite wants us to do. It's a great article, I thought.
Yeah, they do what they want. Look at this Gethner approval by the Senate, 60-34. And the guy is an admitted a tax cheat. And he's trying to tell us that he wants the Secretary of the Treasury job, but he doesn't know how to do his taxes.
And, of course, he's going to be in charge of the IRS, and anyone, the rest of us...
Unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable.
But you see, they have
it just shows you how out of control things are.
Well, you have two sets of rules, one for the elite, and he is part of the elite. He's a member of the Trilateral Commission, the Bilderbergers, the Council on Foreign Relations, the Group of 30. He is, of course, was president of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York City. He's one of the elite. He doesn't have to pay his taxes. He wouldn't have, of course, if they hadn't somebody had brought this out during the hearings. So he reluctantly paid his taxes. Oh, shucks, I'm just so stupid and incompetent. That's why you should select me as Secretary of the Treasury. I mean, how gullible do you think the American people are? And I guess they're pretty gullible.
Well, they probably haven't even followed the thing. And, they just don't have any interest. They don't care.
Well, they're going to care when they lose their job and when they lose their home and when they lose their pension fund and when they lose their insurance policy and they destroy the value of our currency. They're going to care a lot, Bob. It may take a little while, but I think everybody is going to be badly hurt or destroyed, in the coming months and years.
Well, just go back to the 1930s, and the situation today is far, far worse, without going into detail, than it was then. And the value of things went down between 60 and 90%.